Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on chasing opportunities, the pros and cons of moving for financial gain. I'm Kirsty Healey, and I'm a coach and an advisor here at Enable Me. We get a whole lot of inquiry and questions from our viewers on moving abroad, particularly for better jobs and ultimately also better income. So we're going to do a bit of a dive into some data around how much more well-off people are in real terms from a shift offshore. So we all know there's a few economic themes around the high cost of living due to high inflation and high interest rates, high cost of entry to housing. But we are really not alone. This is a trend that's being experienced globally, not just in New Zealand. Primarily, the location that most Kiwis are looking to is Australia. Hence, a lot of the data we'll talk about today is going to be Australia specific. Key question we're going to be asking is, does a higher paying job make you better off regardless of your location? So a little bit of a disclaimer here. What we're going to talk about today is going to be general in nature. It's not a substitute for advice on your individual situation. If you would like advice for you specifically, then we recommend that you come and see us at Enable Me. So who am I? In terms of my background, I've advised clients in the financial services industry for over 20 years across multiple banks, including wholesale, financial markets, and private banking. I have a real passion for investment property. I'm a property investor and part-time developer of infill property. I've also moved around a fair bit, both overseas and nationally. I've lived in Hong Kong and Bali for extended periods, but for different reasons. And I've probably averaged a move nationally every 1 to 2 years consistently. And in fact, I've shifted twice in the last 12 months. Why is that? I've never shifted for income or for a job, but I have for a partner's career. Was it more lucrative? Did it put us in a better financial position? Yeah, it did. Was it really expensive to shift? Yes, it was. Would I do it again? Absolutely. But was it for financial reasons? Yes, it was the driving reason. But what was my biggest takeaway through that? Expat lifestyle creep is a real thing. For example, in Hong Kong, you don't have barbecues at home and invite people around. You're living in a shoebox of an apartment, so you're constantly out 6 to 7 times per week in this lovely little area called Lang Kwai Fong or LKF, if you're familiar with Hong Kong. Also, you're on the doorstep of an amazing travel hub. So you're spending all of your time socializing and adventuring and traveling. So while I think I'd like to think that I'd made more money, I also spent a whole lot more. So I'd like to hear from you. What are your reasons you might decide to move offshore? And we're going to ask you that question really shortly. In terms though of what we're going to do today, in terms of agenda, you've got me for 30 minutes. We're going to go through the pros and cons and misconceptions you might not have thought about when considering the move offshore. How to prepare yourself, the levers you might pull to get ahead faster, regardless of location. We're going to understand your money personality, your risk traits, and how that can have a really strong bearing on your ability to get ahead faster, and how having that really solid financial plan in place will serve you wherever you are and whatever you're doing. And then last thing, we might have some time for a couple of questions at the end as well. So we're going to put a wee poll up on your screen, and we're asking you, what's the biggest reason you might want to move overseas? A, better weather. B, better job opportunities. C, to experience a different way of life. D, to get ahead financially, i.e., the better salary and lower cost of living. Or E, to be closer to extended family. So if you just choose one of those options there, and we'll be able to have a wee look at where the audience sits. It was really interesting that we ran this poll on Tuesday night. I'd be interested in seeing if the results were similar to our viewers on Tuesday. So that'll be popping up really shortly. Ah, interesting. So completely different. So 40% actually first equal better job opportunities and to experience a different way of life, 40% each. And then 20% to be closer to extended family, 0% for better weather. Interesting. So we actually had 50% to get ahead financially. So yeah, really different results there. How interesting is that? So have a look at the statistic. 52,500 Kiwis left the country in the year end March this year. Why is that such a substantive number? Because in past years, it's only been 10 to 12,000 net loss. We've had a couple of times when it's popped up to that 25 to 40,000, but it's never been this high. I would say that yes, we're seeing and experiencing that correction post-COVID. You know, we were all stuck at home. The money that we would have spent on holidays, we were buying spa pools and upgrading the car. So there's a lot of deferred traveling that is now being booked in, and perhaps that's something to do with it. And obviously, there were a few expats that were stuck overseas who came back during the COVID period. And I know from experience talking with my clients that a lot of them are now eyeing up when they next head overseas. This comment from ASB senior economist Mark Smith is interesting. Kiwis are not getting ahead and they're looking offshore and thinking, why not? Why not leave? So it's really tough out there. Kiwis have been feeling the financial pinch. Take a look at these statistics. 37% feel their well-being is adversely affected by finances. 49% of people are either somewhat or very unconfident about the economy. 97% of Kiwis are concerned about the cost of living, and 56% of us are living paycheck to paycheck. Um, the question I'd ask you here is, do you blame the economic environment for your inability to get ahead? Do you blame the country, the government, the culture, the lack of opportunity? Because actually, globally, we're all experiencing the same themes. Or do we need to take actually a closer look at ourselves and our money habits, our mindsets, our decisions around money as a starting point? And because of this, scary stat, over 1.5 million New Zealanders could not access 5,000 within a week without going into debt if they had to pay for something unexpectedly. So for our Enable Me clients, we're, as a first priority, want to have aside 3 months of living expenses on call. We're also aiming to get you to 6 months just as soon as we can. So question for you guys, could you put a number on what your expenses were or are per year? And are you one of the 1.5 million who actually doesn't have any emergency funds on hand? Why is this important to know? Because when you move countries, you take yourself with you and your habits. So let's take a wee look at what's enticing us overseas. Grass is always greener on the other side, right? I don't know about you, but I tend to take mainstream media headlines with a grain of salt. We need to dig a bit deeper into understanding what's on offer and how it's going to impact our specific position and situation. Because actually, the reality is, if you look at Australia in terms of the headlines, guess what? They're exactly the same. Cost of living, global problem. So, if the rest of the world is experiencing what we're experiencing, why are we moving again? Let's take a little look into a bit of data. So, there are often these hidden costs that we don't consider before our move overseas. While there might be amazing headlines around the package that attracts you overseas, does that actually translate into a better net take home pay? Because If we take as Australia as an example, tax rates tend to be a little bit higher, although there are some things that you can claim back on at the end of the financial year. But things like compulsory superannuation in Australia, sitting around 11.5%, about to go up to 12%, which is great, right? If you're a bit older, if you're 67, not so great if you're a 20-year-old and you want all of that additional income to go adventuring. You might want to also look at the cost of childcare and schooling and how that will be different to your New Zealand experience and how close or actually far away you're going to be from those hubs. And there are more opportunities to go and explore when you're in a bigger place with a bigger population. They attract the great concerts, the sporting events, the travel, and there is no doubt that you're going to be building up your network, and that comes at a cost. You want to be thinking about your travel back to New Zealand. And while the cost of travel between the two countries is not great, think about if you've got family and friends left behind and those last minute emergency trips that you might have to do going forward. Yes, we do have different medical systems. My family in Sydney tells me one of their first priorities was getting set up with Medicare. And the mountain of paperwork to get you through the setup stage is vast, something to take into account. We are going to talk a little bit more about housing affordability because that is always a hot topic in terms of how hard is it to get on the ladder in New Zealand. So if you're moving, say, from a regional area in New Zealand to a large city, then obviously the difference between housing affordability in the two areas is going to be really amplified. Affordability is absolutely different between the two countries, and we're going to dig into that a bit deeper in the next slide. You might also want to consider, in addition to the other taxation, is capital gains tax, which they have in Australia, but also a consideration is to check in with your own advisor, your accountant and solicitor, around the implications if you were to move overseas based on any property perhaps that you might leave behind here in New Zealand, particularly ownership structures, etc. And also stamp duty taxes is a difference in Australia. Why it has a big impact? That could be, 3 to 4% of a property price if you're purchasing in Australia, depending on the location, of course. So let's look at housing in a bit more detail. So this is a really busy slide, bunch of data here, but let me distill it down into just a few key points for you. So you can see on the right-hand side, both New Zealand and Australia are above the OECD average when it comes to house price to income ratios. This is not a challenge that is unique to New Zealand. In terms of the price to income ratio, Sydney really takes the crown at 15. But if you take a look actually at Wellington and Auckland, they're not so far removed, 13 for Wellington and 11 for Auckland. They're only slightly more affordable. And Christchurch, well, that's star performer, obviously, sitting at 5. Even Tauranga at 6 is pretty good as well. So the takeaway on this data is it's not as clear-cut as move to Australia for cheaper housing. So, is moving the best way to solve your financial problem? I really like this quote from Neil Gaiman. It's like the people who believe they'll be happy if they go and live somewhere else, but who learn it doesn't work that way. Wherever you go, you take yourself. What does this mean? That people can't change or simply mainly don't change their character by simply changing their surroundings. All food for thought and definitely worthy of spending some time number crunching and researching before you book those tickets. So, what are the real levers that can get you ahead faster? We've seen that Australians are feeling the same financial pinch. It's all good to move for that different experience, but just don't bank on it to help you get ahead financially. So, what levers can we pull, regardless of location, that's actually going to translate to more progress? It comes down to this is a starting point mindset. Scarcity mindset, to my mind, is a really dangerous place to sit in. It's that place where you feel constrained, unable to improve your situation. Your beliefs and your perceptions keep you stuck. You can't see the wood for the trees, essentially. You often blame everything else except for yourself for your situation. Just remember when there's a finger pointing outwards, there are three pointing back. The mentality of a scarcity mindset is life is hard. If your tendency is to think with a scarcity mindset and that resource is finite, then chances are that's not going to change when you move. Quite often, you need the help of a third party to help you see you and your position in a different light. On the flip side of that, an abundance mindset, however, is one where you're proactively looking for ways and options and people to get ahead. You understand yourself, your habits, the impact of your upbringing, and the individual lens that you see the world through. You're also grateful for what you've got and you're curious about what other opportunities are out there. So, what stories are you telling yourself? Are they true? This first one, I just need to earn more money and then it will be easier. Our experience with our higher earning clients is the exact opposite of that statement. High incomes in our many years of experience do not translate to good money habits. In fact, what is true is often our lower income earners have had no choice but to learn through necessity. You'll need to have a lot of money if you want to, you need to have a lot of money if you want to work on a financial plan. Absolutely not true. We're going to go through the foundations of a financial plan really shortly. We're talking here about all things finance, not just about investing a chunk of cash. A financial plan is also about how you manage debt and risk effectively. And this third one, don't start until the conditions are perfect. This to me is just procrastinating on taking action. Often I find that certain personality types find it difficult to make decisions. That would be an amiable personality type, which just happens to be me. We often find with our clients there's a level of regret that comes with our clients who wish they'd started their journey earlier. So let's take a look at the financial foundation. If you've got your mindset sorted, do you need some help with this? Money habits. I find this part's easily defined by someone else generally. Often we're frustrated by results and outcomes, but not sure what we need to change. And our habits are so ingrained in our lives. But if we tweak it just 1% in several places, what could we achieve? The next part of that is looking at setting some goals. Do you have any goals? Have you got them written down? Do you have a plan on how you're going to achieve them? Cash flow management is quite often where we see a lot of our clients are challenged. Do you know what your burn rate is? If I asked you, how much your expense base is for a year and how much you could reliably save, could you tell me? And the last part of it is you might have heard that we like to help our clients get their mortgages paid off sooner. For every dollar in debt you have, you'll be paying it off 3 times. Even if you think that you're doing okay, could you be doing better? Financial success really starts with having this strong foundation. So we like to categorize our clients into different money personalities because it helps us really to put the right plan in place. The shopper likes to spend. They derive satisfaction from purchasing. Interesting fact that a lot of the consultants and coaches here are shopper personalities. Without defined goals, we'll happily spend until the money is gone. We need a solid plan, foundation, we need guardrails, systems, and we need a super exciting goal to keep us interested. Saver, flip side of that. They've totally got the saving part sorted out. They derive satisfaction from seeing balances grow. Oftentimes, they're conservative and they might miss opportunities to grow outside of their comfort zone. And this is quite common, particularly in creating wealth by taking additional risk. And the plotter sits somewhere in between, neither here nor there when it comes to saving or spending. So, why do we care so much? We all know that knowing doesn't equal doing. Plenty of us should be saving, plenty of us should be investing or paying our mortgages off faster. But without an incentive, we're still not doing it. Knowing what your personality type is helps us really to identify what levers we need to pull, what actions we need to take, and what natural tendencies to nurture or to curb to get you ahead. So, where did you learn about money? Was it at school, from family, or not at all? So, our default money personality doesn't tend to change much over time. It's shaped by every interaction that we've had with money. However, our goals will change over time, and they range from just saving a bit more to, going on holiday, helping out our loved ones. So the money personalities help shape the strategy towards achieving goals, whatever that may be for you. So we're next going to have a quick look into adding on top of the personality types. What is your approach to risk? There are three. The first one, safety warden, tends to be rather risk adverse and they prefer to take the safe route when it comes to finances and stay the course. They're naturally conservative, they're great savers, they work methodically towards set goals. They're similar to the saver personality, they find it challenging to work outside their comfort zone. If we then go to the exact opposite, the adventurer, they are energized by a big goal, willing to take a risk, nothing ventured, nothing gained, big risk, big reward, but tend to have a lot of potential crash and burns. While a dreamer, they believe that the universe will provide. There's no need to act, even if that approach hasn't worked for them. They go with the flow. They're often unrealistic, not as good at set goals, and tend more to having a vision of where they're going. So now that we've talked about the personality and risk side, let's talk a bit about willpower and your motivation to act. There are four, and you can read about these tendencies in a book by Gretchen Rubin called The Four Tendencies. There's also a wee quiz you can do online if you search. The most common tendency tends to be obligers, followed by questioners, but let's go through them one by one. The obliger meets outside expectations, but struggles with their own inside expectations. So they tend to respond better to goals and objectives set by other people. The upholder has, the upholder has zero problems with goals and financial success. They just need to have a goal, whether it's set by themselves or someone else. Questioner only meets expectations that make sense to them. So when they're faced with competing goals, they'll often try and evaluate which is most important and end up with analysis paralysis, where they end up doing absolutely nothing. And the rebel, try and get them to do anything, and they will resist and they will be itching to prove you wrong. So we try and understand what each of these are when we're putting together plans for our clients. You might have heard a common terminology, fritter, if you've watched any of our other webinars. We tend to find that most of our clients spend 15 to 20% of their net income on fritter. We define this as being the money that you spend that doesn't bring you any additional happiness, satisfaction, or joy. And I think the easy things to pinpoint here are things like when you use your bank card and you're using PayWave, you're often paying an additional 2 to 2.5% in additional fees for that. Or it could be things like automatic payment subscriptions that, pay regularly and you haven't cancelled them, or they might be that second coffee that you actually don't need. Um, if we're finding fritter within your plan, then we're essentially finding a really quick win in order to be able to propel you forward and make your long term wealth plan work far more effectively for you. So, why would you want to build wealth and achieve those long term goals? And when I ask clients this question, what brings you here today? They typically tell me financial freedom. But what does that actually mean? For me personally, I want to be financially independent, to stand on my own 2 feet without reliance on anything or anyone. But that actually translates into I want options and I want choice. But of course, all of these things are really valid in terms of these long term goals. Um, Personally, I love this one around be ambitious and also curious and be able to test the boundaries of actually what you can achieve. So, whether you choose to stay here, whether you choose to fly the coop and head to Australia or to broader, more exciting playgrounds, your financial plan is what is going to propel you forward. It allows you to enjoy the journey without too much stress. You might want to leave for experiencing different cultures or better weather or being closer to family and friends, or you might simply have restless feet. But I guess in summary, moving purely to get ahead financially has got its flaws. Having a plan these days is not so much like having a map, it's more like a GPS, right? Follow the instructions to get you to your destination with as little stress as possible. So, how can we help you? If you decide that you'd like to come and chat to one of us, what we do is we diagnose where you are at the moment, we figure out where you want to be heading to, we assess what your capability is. And that really is taking a look at actually what's your position at the moment and do you have resources that we can redirect so they're working a bit smarter for you. We want to design a strategy to help you grow that wealth. And obviously, we want to be your trusted sounding board. It's great to have all those ideas, but we get them out there? When I was trading foreign exchange and wholesale markets, we had a saying on the trading floor: plan your trade and then trade your plan. I think that's a saying that works really well with Enable Me because we're all about helping clients to execute. So we do have a little special offer for you today. If you decide that you'd like to come and talk to either myself or one of the other advisors and coaches here at Enable Me, if you click on the link here or the QR code, you'll get a special offer of $149 for the first consultation. They run for 90 minutes, and that's a saving. Usually our fees are $400. So that's just for today. If you do choose to sign up tomorrow, then it's still a discounted rate, but a little bit higher at $249. Um, so we're going to go and see if my producers have a few questions to ask me, and I'll just leave this QR code up here.
Yeah, so we've got some questions. I think we have time for 2 questions. The first question is, are there any implications to consider when it comes to moving costs?
Definitely. And so there is kind of two approaches here. You can either go DIY or you can actually find a global moving company who will do everything for you. Obviously, if you're DIYing, it can work out cheaper. How much risk is involved? That's something you'll have to weigh up. Getting quotes from several places if you're going for that global company is obviously a really good idea. You want to also ensure that you've got insurance in place, particularly for, if you're sending a whole household overseas. But you also perhaps want to take a look into, is it worthwhile taking those bigger items over? or not? Is it going to be more cost effective to sell up here and then buy new items at your destination country? The other thing that I would take into account is pets and the cost of relocating pets, cost of quarantine, and how long that's going to take in terms of timing, because that can be several $1,000s to do that. And we know that the borders in Australia are just as strict as New Zealand when it comes to agriculture and live animals.
Thanks. And our last question is, does age affect the level of financial risk involved with moving?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question because I think it can be generalized as well. Because the younger you are, whatever goes wrong, you're going to have a much longer runway to enable you to recover from it. So I don't think that this is an exception to that rule. Um, with reference to things like retirement or NZ Super, etc., when you're transferring between countries, that's something you should take some specific financial advice on for your situation, because there are a number of things that you will come up against depending on which country that you go to. So, yeah, again, just go back to the longer the runway that you have, the less risk there is. And I hope that makes sense.
All right, thank you so much. That was the last question. I'll leave you to close off.
Thanks so much. So, we would love to see you here at Enable Me if you'd like to come and chat to one of us, just reiterating it's a 90-minute session. You can come and see me or one of the other coaches here. Really look forward to that. I hope that this has been a really helpful session for you. We also have a longer extended session if you would be interested in hearing a little bit more of the data. I'm sure we've got a recording that we can share with you. But thanks for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.